Half racks, full racks, bed caps. These are all great options to help maximize the storage and or protection of items and accessories in your bed's cargo space. And comparatively, each of them carry their own advantages and disadvantages from one another and can range in price from a few $100s to a few $1,000s. Now, you're probably sitting there just like I was, researching for the best option to suit your needs and your wallet. But these days, there's many companies, designs, and variables you need to consider before actually pulling the trigger on one of these things. Most importantly is probably load capacity, which we'll touch more on in just a minute. But then you have material composition. Is it steel or aluminum? Is it tubing, angle, extrusion, or forgings even? And for you hardtoppers out there, you have sheet metal, fiberglass, and other composite materials to consider as well. Whether you're at the job site, the campsite, or a mountainside trail, there's definitely a cargo solution for you. And ultimately, it's up for you to decide. The rack system we decided to go with, I feel, is the perfect blend of versatility, modularity, and strength. It makes for a really nice, lightweight package. Emphasis on light. Want to see what we chose to carry our world? Stay tuned. If you didn't pick up on any of those hint bombs I was dropping, it's a Leitner. Hey, welcome back to the Gator Overland channel. I'm John, and in today's video I explain why I ultimately chose to go with the Leitner ACS forge system for our vehicle's Overland build. Now, this is not to discredit any other companies or designs out there. It's just ultimately what I chose to go with for our application. And I will say, I am not sponsored by Leitner or anybody else that is affiliated with it. This is me purchasing it and explaining to you what I went with, why I went with it. And it's not a Jeep specific system. You can order for Mopar, GM vehicles, Toyota. It's all out there. Check them out. They're great. The innovation and the accessories that go along with it are just second to none. So let's get started. Now, just a heads up, y'all, this is a very important note that I know is Gladiator specific and possibly Toyota Tacoma, but it's not listed in the instruction manual. But if you are not equipped with this accessory rail right here on your bed, you need to stop right now. You cannot install the Leitner rack system without this rail. And one of the only drawbacks I've found about the Leitner rack system is that you actually forfeit that rail to utilize theirs. But they are equipped with this little extrusion rail system right here that you can put other tie downs on. So just a heads up that there are extras that are required. And I believe these things run about $250 to $300 depending on where you get them from. For those of you who are running tonneau covers, soft or hard, you need to go ahead and remove that and the latching mechanism at the back. Those are not needed and you can't run them with the kit. All right, I don't want to come off sounding like a dad right off the bat, but I highly suggest you make a few passes through this installation manual here, at least to get some coordination. It's not a really difficult install, but there's some small fasteners and stuff you probably want to make a count of to make sure that you're not halfway through the project and missing a nut or a bolt or something like that. But if you're a guy like me who doesn't read very much, and for that matter doesn't read very well, there's really high detailed 3D renderings, great pictures, and straight and to the point prompts of exactly what to do. So if that's your case, it's really easy to follow along with. Before you get started, if you're planning on laying it out in the driveway like I've done here, you probably want to locate some kind of protective barrier, whether it be cardboard, a blanket, or padding like you see here. That way you protect that outer coating that's on these forged components here. Speaking of forged components, man, they look like they're heavy, but they're opposite of that. Lightweight, rigid, and I'm honest with you, it feels like I'm holding a piece of the space shuttle here. Really outstanding stuff. I'm super excited about it. So we've accounted for all the inventory here, and I actually came out with more than I needed. I had 2 extra rib nuts and 1 extra M6 by 20 bolt, which that's fine with me. I was really surprised to find that they provide the required M4, 5, and 6 millimeter hex heads to put this stuff together. You probably want to invest in some hex head sockets just for convenience, but those are in there and you can put the majority of this stuff together. Now, as you can see, I've laid everything out. That's the reference to the back glass. This is the tailgate area. This will be the driver's side. This is the passenger side, and I have all the nuts and fixtures and everything laid out in coordination with where they're supposed to go. This little rubber stuff right here is an insulator pad that goes into the top of the extrusion here. So when it's up on the top rail and you have kayaks, wood, or whatever you want to put up there for accessories, it's a little bit more of a scuff on there. That way it's not so slick with anything that's up there. Now, that other box over there we accounted for, but that is actually for the next video where we're going to install the rooftop tent. So, overview, we have an installation manual that has outstanding information, detail, and shortened to the point, which is great. And one thing they don't slack in the department of is stickers. Good for y'all, Leitner. We all love stickers, right? Tools. Everything you see here is actually more than what's required to do the installation. I went ahead and put out a few wrenches and odds and ends just in case you don't see what is required in the installation manual. Other things will work. As long as you have a torque wrench, whether it's the old analog style or the digital style, Your kit actually comes with a 4, 5, and 6 millimeter hex heads, but I have some laid out here, and if you want to invest in some socket styles to work with your wrenches, those are nice to have, especially if you're going to be using it with a torque wrench. You want to have a 10 millimeter and a 13 millimeter wrench for the ratcheting style and or an adjustable style. Any one of those will work. You'll also want to have an electric drill, make sure that the battery is charged. You want to have a tape measure, a center punch, or some kind of marking utensil for doing a hole in the bed. The kit actually comes with a 25/64 drill bit. I went ahead and picked up one at the hardware store just in case that one dulls out faster than necessary to complete the project, or if it breaks, worst case scenario. Now this toolkit is definitely not required. This is a rivnut set tool. I already have this. Once you figure out how rivnuts work, you'll use them on just about everything. Leitner does provide a really simple rivnut set tool which utilizes the 13 millimeter and the 10 millimeter wrench to help flare out the rivnut on the inside of the hole you put in the bed. But using the rivnut set tool, all you do is just pull out those two arms, it flares it out, and it pulls out the screw at the same time. And there's no having to beat on things and potentially spinning the rivnut inside the bed. And it utilizes an M6 rivnut in the kit. So, like I said, this is not necessary, but if you're interested in one of these things, they're great to have. I'll leave a link in the description below for that and any other materials that you may need to do the installation. All right, just a quick overview. As you can see, I've done some assembly already. Your rack system involves 2 A's and 2 B's. In the configuration on the driver's side, the B will be towards the glass and the A will be towards the tailgate. And on the passenger side, the A will be towards the glass and the B will be towards the tailgate. And these T-nuts here, you'll have what's called the single nut, you'll have the short T-nut here, and you'll have what's called a long T-nut here. So there's 3 different kinds. You want to make sure that whenever you put your T-nuts on, obviously loose, but you'll have the mushroom head or the T facing up. As you can see, we have the stationary load bar bracket here, and it's configured to where you'll have the extrusion, the main pole, to slide through here. Now, speaking of extrusion, you may want to go ahead, take some of your T-nuts and test them inside the extrusion to make sure they smoothly go through. The reason why that is, I went to put this thing together a little while ago, and come to find out, the protective coating that's on the aluminum was a little bit thicker than it should be, and it wouldn't allow the T-nut go, thus making it nearly impossible to assemble the rack system. So just keep that in mind, word to the wise. All right, we've already got pillar B attached to it. This is one with the stationary load bar that goes towards the back glass. It's very important right now that you do this. You take these little T-slots for the sliding load bar bracket and you put it in now, because once you push this thing all the way on, they won't come out on either side. So it's very important that you do that just before you put this together. And again, leave everything loose. Next, we're going to attach the uprights to the driver's side bed rail bracket. What you'll need is your 4 M10 by 25, 2 at this end, 2 at that end down there. You'll need your torque wrench set to 40 foot-pounds and your 6 millimeter hex head, or utilize the provided hex heads. Once you get your bolts set, you can go ahead and fasten these all the way down to the full 40 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and snug them up with this. Just make sure you have the threads in there properly so you don't cross thread. Once you've done that, come back and double check your torque. All right, your driver's side bracket structure is complete. Again, these are the only bolts that are torqued. All the rest is loose at this time. Only until you've tightened the uprights to the bed rail bracket at 40 foot-pounds can you tighten the 6 bolts down here and 4 bolts down there at 18 foot-pounds. Now that you have the uprights attached to the bed rail bracket, it's time to install the bed rail T-slots into the bed rail. Doesn't matter where you put them at this point because you have predetermined slots built in to the bracket. Do this on the other side. Now we're getting somewhere. We have the structure ready to attach to the bolts that we've predetermined, kind of close to where the slots are. You'll be able to slide them back and forth. And though this is light, you probably want to have an extra hand, but at this point in time, I don't have one. So we're going to shoot for it. Once you get your bolts lined up, going through, keep in mind these bolts here do have a hole in the center for an Allen key to keep it still. It's a 4 millimeter. And the nuts, we're going to go ahead and put this one on here. They are going to be your 13 millimeter. Looks like we nailed it. See if this actually works. Hey, yeah, just stick it in there and it'll hold on to it well enough to get the nut on there. Now once you get them on there somewhat, you want to take your 13 millimeter and snug them up enough to where you'll be able to move it back and forth but not fully tighten it down. Next, you're going to install your upright braces. You'll need your M8 by 25, which is a 6 millimeter Allen. It's going to go up there, it doesn't matter which way around it goes. Slides right up. It's actually open on one end and threaded into the structure on the other. Just want to make sure, because it's aluminum, that you work it back a little bit so you don't cross thread it. And you want to get it snug, not tight, enough to where you can move it back and forth. Do this to the other side. Next, you'll want to attach your upright bracket to the upright brace, and you'll need your M8 by 20, and the angle, the hole, put the holes toward the top. And again, this is already a threaded structure here, so they're just going to go in like so. You want to tighten these down just enough to where this thing is able to move, so not fully fastened. Once you get that done, these will be your 5 millimeter hex head. Now that you have the brackets in place, what you want to do is situate the assembly towards the rear so that the bracket sits directly in the center of this pillar right here. Now I've improvised, it didn't say to do this in the instructions, but I went ahead and found it's about 3 1/8 from side to side of the pillar, divided by 2 is 1 9/16. So I made a mark up here and a mark down here and double checked it with a straight edge. We're good to go. And I've moved it to where it's dead center in line with that. From there, you'll go down and tighten your 3 bolts, or nuts, I should say, to 16 foot-pounds. Now that you have everything tightened up, it's actually already started to become really rigid. The next thing you'll do is you're going to take your 60-inch load bar and you're going to run it through your T-nuts right here from side to side, and then you'll tighten them down just enough to where you can move it back and forth but not sloppy. All right, once you get it actually aimed into the right side of the spot, it goes in just like that. What we're probably going to do, just to make sure everything's good for now, is I'm going to measure from here. I got 5 1/2. Here I got 9, so we'll divide that by half. About 2 1/2 inches. It should be about 7 7 if that's the case. Next, you're going to take the sliding low bar bracket and position it as far rearward as possible on the bolts that you put into the extrusion earlier. There we go. And you're going to fasten with the 2 rubber knobs that they provided in the kit. Once you get that done, go to the other side. Next, we'll take care of installing the 60-inch load bar, and we're only going to slide them onto the T-nuts. You do not want to tighten them down at all at this point. Next, what we're going to do is check for the squareness at both front and rear. Basically, all you do is you take a tape measure and you measure from the inside here at the furthest point forward to the inside here. But as you'll find, this actually has a little bit of bearing load weight, and you can understand that the way that this structure actually develops its strength is by a retention. So basically, these are going to be pushed out, and then you tighten it in place. That way, whenever the weight pushes down on everything, it kind of has a nice little tight knit. You think like a bridge, trussing and everything. Well, finding a solution to holding it in place while you find 40 inches is not the easiest thing. So I've improvised and I found a piece of 1 1/2 inch PVC pipe that was laying in the backyard, trimmed it down to 40 inches, and we're going to slide it right into place. And I know I'm at 40 inches. We'll double check. 40 inches on the money. I'm not saying you have to do it this way, but at a couple cents for a couple feet, 40 inches, you want to do that. Now you just tighten everything up. We'll do the same thing to the rear. All right, just to clarify, it's on the outside of the bracket. It's going to be 6 1/2 inches on the outside of the bracket to the end of the extrusion there on both ends, 6 1/2 inches. Here we are, the moment we've all been waiting for, drilling into the bed, or at least the moment we've all been dreading. If you've done everything right, you'll see that the holes actually are still in line. Everything is good to go. Now you can mark with either a marker, a paint pen, or you can use a center punch in there. What I'm going to do, once I center punch it, I'm going to use a 1/8 drill bit to make a pilot hole, and I'll follow it with that 25/64 coming in. So let's go ahead and get this marked. Swing that up out of the way. Looks to be pretty good. Well, that seems to work. That wasn't so bad. You know, looking at it now, I'm probably going to step it up one more. We're going to go with a 1/4. It's 25/64. It's a pretty big dude right there. That wasn't so bad. Got a hole there. Double check our riv nut. Looks like it's going to fit. I went ahead and peeled back the tape. I left it there so we still had our line to reference, but we're going to go ahead and install the riv nut into the hole. And I'm using a soft mallet. There we go. Now it's nice and flush. All right, now that the riv nut is in place, you're free to use the actual tool. You'd need a 10mm and your 13mm. Basically, you'd screw in the 13mm portion of it and then come back in and tighten the 10mm portion of it until it pulls back on there. But we have this riv nut tool here. It's a really cool setup. Basically, all you do is spread out the arms like this. Basically, this spins in and out, so you don't have to do that knocking method of loosening and tightening. You pull out the lever, spread these things apart, put it in there. It should start threading in there. That's what it's doing right now. And then all you do, once it's set, is squeeze just like that. Done. And it's extracted. That's it. Now you feel free to use this, but this works a lot better. Now that your riv nut's in place, you want to take your M6x20 and your 4mm Allen and swing down the bracket into place. And what we're going to do here is get it set to where we can make the spot for the upper hole. So far everything's going in nice. You don't want it too tight because what we're going to do is unloosen these bolts out of here, swing this out of the way, and then swing the bracket over to the side after we make a mark where to put it. Now you're going to remove your swing this up and out of the way, and on your line, making sure that everything is good to go, which it is. You're going to mark your spot. You have a little bit of leeway. And don't forget, you can actually use this 1/4-inch drill bit as a pilot bit in the existing hole in the bracket if you want to do it that way. But I'm just going to mark that out. Swing that out of the way, line up in about the center. A nice little poke, and do just like what we did before. Starting with the 1/8 inch, drill the hole, set the riv nut, and then we'll swing this back into place and repeat everything you've already seen. There you have it. Everything went together perfectly, lined up, didn't have any issues, didn't have to waller anything out. And if you actually look closely at these bolts there, he's got his name Leitner in there. It's a really interesting detail that, I mean, everything's excellent as far as that. Now, as far as the M6x20s that hold the bracket to the pillar, those tighten to 10 foot-pounds. And as for all the other bolts there, you have your M6s that tighten to 10 foot-pounds. The M8 style will tighten to 18 foot-pounds. And then the M10s will tighten to 40 foot-pounds. So at this point, now that everything's done, just go back through and make sure you fasten everything to the proper foot-pounds. Down to the final steps. You'll take your little rubber mat here that goes down into the extrusion. It is a little bit longer than necessary, and that's okay. We can trim it after we get it in there. Just going to line it up and see. And anything left over, you're just going to nick off with your razor blade. And it's just that simple. Last step is putting on the Leitner end cap. And that just goes in just like that. you're done. Why did I ultimately choose Leitner ACS or active cargo system for our truck's build? Well, first of all, it's a truck, which means I have a bed, and I intend to use this bed. When I'm not off-roading or overlanding or kayaking, this load bar slides all the way up here, and now I've gained all the rearward space to my bed's area. Whether I want to put mountain bikes back here, me and my wife like to do mountain biking, anything like that. Even with a rooftop tent, the mountain bikes sit, everything's elevated, and I have plenty of room. Now the number two, and more importantly, is load capacity. Leitner is one of the only companies that offers the three values of load capacity. Static weight, which means sitting still, on-road weight dynamic, and off-road weight dynamic. The only other company I've found that actually advertises an off-road dynamic is Yakima HD, which is similar to this setup here, but they actually just mount to the bed caps, and it's rated at 300. This one's rated at 400 pounds of off-road dynamic weight. And what I mean by off-road is whenever you're off camber and moving back and forth like that, this is able to maintain 400 pounds of weight. Your typical rooftop tent weighs about 150 to 200 pounds. If you have that active cargo pod or the Pod XL, those are rated for anywhere up to 200 pounds. So between the two, you're almost at your max capacity of your off-road weight. Now on-road capacity is what most of your racks are based on. That's braking, stopping, typical road condition stuff. This one's rated at 800 pounds. And then you have your static load weight, which, to be honest with you, this one knocks it out of the park at 1,400 pounds. That's more than the actual payload of this truck's capable of doing that's allowed to be sitting here on top. So if you decide to carry a boat on top of here, you could. Now for your convenience, I made this spreadsheet here that's going to show you everything as far as the main brands that I actually considered looking at, and you can compare them as far as price, how much the actual systems weigh, and how much they're capable, and whether or not they cover the three: on-road, off-road, and static dynamic. You can make your decision from there. Now you're probably wondering why I went with the forged ACS over what is now called the Classic. There's nothing to discredit about the Classic. It's still outstanding. As mentioned, this one's rated at 1,400 pounds static. The Classic is rated for 1,000, so it's just a little bit underneath there. The Classic's on-road weight is 500 versus this 800, and the Classic's off-road dynamic is rated at 250 versus this one's 400. So as far as, yes, more is better in that case, but we're also looking at the Classic being 81 pounds and this one being 85 pounds. Other than that, everything works exactly the same as all the other ones there. All the pods are all, generally, they're all 23 inches tall here. Another thing to mention with Leitner is this rack system also works with Rhino Rack, Thule, and Yakima products with the rail system. And if you should end up needing more storage, this will also work with the deck storage system in your bed. Now this may be used, but this is an idea for you guys who are coastal fishermen out there who are looking for a rack system to carry around your kayaks or rooftop tents for that matter. These racks, this T-slots, would make a great spot for you to be able to put your little PVC pipe for your fishing rod holders for you guys who run the deep rods right offshore. Whether you do it here, you have your reel station right here, or you move the load rack down and out of the way, you can have your reel station right here. I mean, it's that simple. Catching fish, you can't beat it. That was one of the quick things that I thought, man, I'm gonna throw some kayaks up there, PVC pipe right there, that's gonna be awesome. As with most designs, they usually come with a set of pros and cons. The pros on this one heavily outweigh the cons. One of the main cons that I've noticed is this rail, and I mentioned it earlier. I don't know if it's just too structural load, but it would be cool to have some little C-notch cutouts. That way you could still utilize some sort of the actual Mopar rail there. I know companies possibly like JCR or 813 Fabrication and Design. I have their bracket in there for my air compressor. They have a set of MOLLE panels that actually go here so you can put accessories. And I'm sure they probably will work, but I know that they use some kind of spacers and stuff on the back. So maybe they'll have to say, does this work with a Leitner rack or something? Anyway, just something to think about. Now for that, I could say that's probably one of the main cons, if not the only one. I do wish that a tonneau cover would work with this, and from what I understand, there is some in process possibly for these units, which would be great, because then you don't have to worry about dust and everything getting all over your components, and you still have utilization of all your rack stuff. So just something to keep an eye out for. If you enjoyed today's video, found it informative or helpful in your installation or making a decision to go with a rack, not necessarily a Leitner, but a rack in general, go ahead, give us a big thumbs up, let us know how we're doing. For a heads up on any future installs or adventures, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, notification bell. You can follow us along our journey. Remember, we at Gator Overland encourage each and every one of you to take a daily moment to unplug and reconnect with the outdoors, even if it's just for a few minutes. And as always, we thank you for watching. Have fun, keep it safe, and just go. Thanks, y'all.